Hello and welcome back to the Trinity League Football Podcast. I'm Dan Albano with the Orange County Register and OCVarsity.com, and I'm joined once again for another season with our Trinity League insider, Scott Barajas. It's August 6th, 2018. Scotty, can you believe it's another football season? We're back doing a football podcast talking about Trinity League, SoCal football. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Dan. It's just another year here again. We've been hitting this thing year round. It's hot. Weather's football weather. You know, I'm already geared up. So I think we got got a good podcast going for this season, and I'm looking forward to it.
Now, I'm right with you. I mean, the season's starting earlier. Seems like every year. This is another early season. We got games coming up August 16th, 17th. You know, it's something to get used to. As the state CIF tries to kind of reconcile all its calendars and try to move up everything with all the different graduation dates. So, how do you come out on that, Scotty? I know, the grumblings you hear from the coaches aren't too thrilled to be starting this early. The kids don't seem to mind. I know it's pretty hot out there for them right now. They're adjusting their schedules, but what's your feeling on the early start dates?
It's tough with a lot of the younger kids, because nowadays, you get the freshmen that come in and they kind of get evaluated from that standpoint. So it's a little bit tougher also with school, because they're not in school, yet. A lot of schools start, some start next week, some start 2 weeks, 3 weeks. But I think it's all based on, like, CIF doesn't want to have to play that championship, state game, a week before Christmas. And that seems to be that gripe, and that's why they decided to make that move.
Yeah, and the whole school year's moved up. I think a lot of the school sports, those spring sports, they want to keep away from graduations, and they don't want kids having to decide between graduation and going to a state championship in a spring event. But right now our focus is on football. 2018 football season is bearing down on us, and we're going to start to preview our Trinity League teams here once again in the CIF Southern section tonight. We're going to do a summer recap on some of the summer highlights. We're also going to break down strengths and weaknesses as we start to preview these teams for the 2018 season. And we're also going to talk about under-the-radar players for each of the teams to watch in 2018. So, Scotty, let's start off here with breaking down some of the highlights, summer highlights for each of the Trinity League teams. We're going to start with Santa Margarita, which by my mind has kind of had a quiet offseason. They were hit heavy by graduations, but they do have some transfers that we need to talk about that came in. But what's your thoughts on, summer highlights for Santa Margarita, which doesn't do a lot of passing league, so they're a little quiet that way.
Exactly. Santa Margarita's probably noise this offseason was getting the transfer QB Peter Caselli from St. John Bosco. He was a freshman last year. And then they also had gotten Trillian Harris from Chaparral, who actually was a varsity starter for them last year. But he has moved on to Mission Viejo. And like you said, I don't believe the Eagles took part in any passing league tournaments this summer. So they were just on the down low. We didn't hear about any camp kids or anything like that. I think really the off-season news was those two quarterbacks. So, the Eagles were kind of laying low. So it was not a great, off-season by some standards. But, I think Coach Fisher kind of likes it that way. So.
Right. I think there's some of that too. A couple of transfers, I think, and I think one of them, I think you're pretty high on. I think we've kind of talked about him, but they have Santa Margarita has a transfer from Orange Lutheran, a cornerback, Mark Ardria.
It's Ard. Mark Ard Jr.
Ard Jr. is a cornerback. I think he might be the best of the group. A couple other names I'll throw at you, because I know you have. I think you've talked to me about Mark Ard Jr. But couple wide receivers. Cole Uceda from Tesoro. He's potentially a starting wide receiver as a sophomore. And another wide receiver from San Juan Hills, Josh Mickus, and two defensive linemen, one from also San Juan Hills, pretty good size here. Greg Doyle from San Juan Hills, 6'4", 230, defensive end, and another defensive end from Woodbridge, Derek Wilkins. But I think Mark Ard Jr., I'm sorry for getting his name wrong there, I think that's one of the guys that you're high on.
Yeah, I mean, I know we've talked about, he's actually, I have him as my under the radar player.
Oh, okay.
Since we're talking about him now. So, yeah, he's an Olu defensive back that played last year. He actually played in their secondary last year. He's a speed guy. He's a 4'4", 40, and he has a Nevada offer. And it's kind of, I was surprised when he made that move over to Santa Margarita, because he was actually going to be one of Olu's, returning guys in the secondary. But obviously, things changed, and he's at Santa Margarita, and that Santa Margarita is actually in need of some speed, and we can get more on that a little bit later. But yeah, he's my under the radar player, and a lot of people don't really remember him because he played sparingly last year.
All right, so let's talk about moving on to Jay Serra, off-season highlight for the summer. I saw Jay Serra at the Edison Battle Beach, just like you did, battle their way into, I believe, they made to the quarterfinals of that tournament, lost in the first round of the quarters to Bosco, I believe it was. And I think they came back a couple weeks later and won the Huntington Beach passing tournament. They had a rough go, or they stumbled a little bit in their first round game. They got pummeled by Corona Del Mar. I saw that game at Redondo Beach in the Redondo Beach Redondo Union tournament. That was the following weekend. So the Edison started. So they were busy with, and Caden Bell emerging. Definitely was a highlight because all these stops he played well. The transfer quarterback from Servite, I think that's going to be key for them. But starting with that July 7th date, they were solid. Jay Serra was solid at the Edison tournament. The week later, I think they didn't lose. They lost their opener to CDM, had a very tough time in the secondary. That's going to be, but we'll talk more about that in a second, or a little bit while. But then they finished off winning the Huntington Beach tournament. I believe they beat Huntington Beach in the finals. And I'd say Caden Bell's development has been a key. And then I guess another big thing with Jay Serra is the health of Munar McLean, USC commit. I didn't see him in those first two stops, but all reports, and Munar himself has told me that he is feeling good and he's going to be back for the regular season. But what's your thoughts on the Lions, Scotty?
Yeah, up until the Huntington Beach tournament, Jay Serra had a quiet summer. They made it to the gold division of the Battle of the Beach, and they got beat by St. John Bosco in that first round. I think something 26-14. But again, like you said, Munar, he was out. Some of the kids weren't all there, so that kind of made a little bit difference. But probably the highlight I'd probably say is the 14 off-season transfers. Now, I know Mater Dei picked up the big name kids, but Jay Serra topped the Trinity League in numbers. And their probably highest profile kid was Chris Street coming over from Mater Dei. And we'll talk more on that. But yeah, and their secondary, that's another area that we'll talk about. But I'm pretty much, I know everybody talks about, the offseason acquisitions, but all the names will come out a little bit later. So,
all right, let's move on to Servite out of Anaheim. The Friars, obviously, their big move was they made one of the biggest coaching hires of the offseason, especially in Orange County. Was bringing back Troy Thomas, their highly successful coach that from the past, he comes back. He was coaching at Crespi. Coach Thomas has led Servite to 2 CIF titles and a state title. Also lost in 1 state title. I had a reader, Scotty, that told me when I was writing some things about the Friars, he told me, when did Servite win a state title? And they only seem to remember the De La Salle game, but they don't remember that the year before they had beat Rockland in a great game, like 33-30. So obviously bringing back a coaching legend in Troy Thomas replaces Scott Meyer, who rebounded pretty nicely at University in Irvine, Pacific Coast League. his old league where he was from when he was the coach at Corona Del Mar. But then you have the other big offseason news is they lost pretty much all their top returning seniors, and there's quite a impressive list. A couple of them are at St. John Bosco. We mentioned Caden Bell, starting quarterback Jay Serra, but they lost a lot of talent. What's your thoughts on the Friars offseason? Of course, we're talking about highlights, and here I'm bringing out a downer. So I guess I didn't follow my own. I didn't follow my own script on that one.
Well, it goes like this for the Friars. For a program that once that looked dead, the hiring of Troy Thomas and an optimistic freshman team who had a great performance in these Frost tournaments has kind of given the Friars new life. It's not going to be immediate help for their varsity, but it's a start. And the addition, Servite picked up some new faces. Quarterback Blaze McKibben from Westlake / Sarah. He was at Westlake for some of the spring before he played at Sarah last year, and then coming over to Servite, right before summer. And they picked up a junior, 5'11", 170-pound wide receiver Julian Alessi from Palos Verdes. He's probably going to be their primary offensive receiver. He led Palos Verdes in receptions and yards last year for them. So, I know he's been like an under-the-radar guy. No one has mentioned his name at all. And they also got a pretty good group of Los Al kids who will probably shore up those vacated skill positions. A lot of sophomores and a couple of juniors. But it's going to fill in that mass exodus that we had said in the offseason. So, Servite, went probably, we'll talk about more of this later, from just being possibly a winless team to, now competing with, some of these late acquisitions and just, the rigor of Troy Thomas is, going to give everybody that fighting chance anyways. So it may not be immediate help, but they're on the uptake. So.
Yeah, and I have talked to Troy a few times, and I think they are definitely focusing on the freshman group. I think he wants to keep them together. Like you said, a good freshman group. Servite won the freshman passing tournament at Edison, and the next week they won the freshman passing tournament at Mission Viejo, and they have a freshman quarterback. They have a couple quarterbacks, apparently, but there is one freshman who's definitely ahead of them, and his name is Noah Fafita. So he is from the powerhouse, one of the powerhouse youth programs, Orange County Buckeyes. So who you'll see, you might see some Buckeyes red around Servite games or on their sidelines because they have some association with the Buckeyes. They're not the modern day red, but they're the Buckeye red. So if you see some red shirts running around Servite, if you're a Friar fan, don't get worried that it's a Monarch. It's probably a Buckeye. But speaking of the Monarchs, let's talk about their highlight of the offseason, Scotty. Here's a team, modern day, that won both the Edison and Mission Viejo passing tournaments. In the finals of the Edison tournament, they beat Mission Viejo quite soundly, capped a great defensive effort. And another highlight for the Monarchs was, then they beat Bosco in a pretty low-scoring game in the finals of the Mission Viejo tournament. Pretty intense down there. That was a great duel, even in the summer passing league, between Bryce Young, the recent USC commit, and DJ, quarterback at St. John Bosco, who's both talented juniors. But it was, modern day got, like you said, a lot of high-profile transfers led by Bryce Young. Has got probably be the biggest one of them, of course, the quarterback replacing JT Daniels now at SC. But what's your thoughts on the Monarchs offseason, the reigning national champions?
Yeah, I mean, a lot has gone on with them. If you want to go take it back-to-back passing league tournament wins at the Battle of the Beach and the Mission, but coming into summer, the key is that Modern Day had to gel and bring together pretty much an entirely new offense, and they struggled early on. I mean, in the early tournaments and spring games, they were playing with the skeleton squad. It wasn't until Mission Viejo that they pretty much had all their main offensive starters playing together on offense. Brew finally came back, and you could tell it opened up the offense for the other Braden Huffman-Diskin, Mike Martinez, Cody Epps, and Josiah Zamora. But then on the flip side, some of the defense was out, so there was actually 3 freshmen you talk about Servite's group of freshmen, and nobody's talking about Mater Dei's group of freshmen, but that Mater Dei group of freshman class, and I'll probably get, some heat for this, but that Mater Dei group is no slouch to that Servite group. So even though Mater Dei doesn't take part in passing leagues or anything like that, pound for pound, I think Mater Dei freshman group is a little bit better than Servite's group. But 3 of these kids are actually going to be on varsity. Now, I don't know how they're going to play back and forth, but they held their own in these passing league tournaments. And, Mater Dei is always, we'll talk more about like the next, their weaknesses, but like they always have had issues with depth. But these kids give them a little bit more depth in spots where they are needed. But pretty much, yeah, it's that coming together, and if they can come together, then that's primarily been seeing the highlight of the group during this offseason.
Yep. Yeah, I remember Bryce Young definitely talked about that. So, but let us move on to a couple more schools here. We close out our, looking at the off seasons of these teams. Orange Lutheran off-season highlight for me. Obviously Ryan Helinski had a great quarterback. He won the offseason, in my opinion, just about as far as an individual standpoint. First elite quarterback selected to the Elite 11, and I'm talking football. Football-wise, obviously we know Ryan, had a family tragedy with his brother committing suicide. But as far as winning the offseason, I mean football-wise, he won just about every major award. He was an MVP at a regional camp for the opening regionals. He played super at the regional finals. He looked great in passing league. He committed to South Carolina. I just think the guy did everything he could possibly do. And I think Kyle Ford, for the receiver, he might have had the best offseason of any receiver in the Trinity League, because like you said, Brew McCoy was hurt, and Kyle Ford stepped in there, and he was an MVP at the opening final. And I think Orange Lutheran, they had a good run to the semifinals of the Edison tournament. Was kind of upset, surprisingly, by Mission Viejo, and then they weren't full strength at all down at the Mission tournament. Helinski didn't really even play. He was resting after all these camps and combines and stuff like that. I mean, and they kind of took it easy down there. But I think they played enough and showed enough that they're going to be serious contenders. So I think it was a good offseason for the Lancers. Yeah,
I pretty much right there with you. Ford winning the Open MVP and Helinski, being number 2 at the opening. I know that's probably their top highlight. And I know most would want to share a team highlight. But that probably I would think of getting to the semifinals at Battle on the Beach, and they did it without Logan Loya, and he didn't play in either passing tournament, and he's big, he's huge coming out of that slot. He's very tough to cover, so, they did it without him, and they lost to Mater Dei, I think 14-6. That was the closest, Mater Dei game had all summer, I think, so, and that's encouraging for them. And we'll talk more about their defense, but that's pretty much Oulu's highlights. They have it's those two guys, and those two guys are what's going to carry this team.
So Bosco got to the finals of the Mission Viejo tournament, and played very well. So that was a highlight. Their last tournament was outstanding, and I guess the biggest highlight is when you open a $7 million stadium, a football stadium on campus. That's got to be a top highlight. I know the Braves celebrated that heavily and rightfully so. And of course, the transfers were significant at Bosco as well. Just like Mater Dei, they got some high-profile guys, guys like Titus Toller and McDuffie and Lytle, all from Servite. Titus Toller has committed to Colorado, I believe. Outstanding cornerback. Lytle just committed to Wisconsin. McDuffie's still out there. But those are pretty 3 Trinity League guys from Servite that were among the probably the best players there at Servite as far as the seniors would have been. But what's your thoughts on the highlights for Bosco offseason?
Yeah, I'm right there with you with the probably stadium. They did win the Orlando Scandrick Los Al tournament. They did win that, and they also won both lineman competitions.
Oh yeah,
at Warren and at Mission Viejo. However, both those tournaments, I think one of them was more obstacle, rather than skill. But the fact that they won them says a lot, because usually the top linemen always win those competitions, and Mater Dei was actually in both of those. So, Bosco seems to be taking that same path as Mater Dei did with their linemen, and we know how much Mater Dei dominated and won in the trenches last year, and Bosco's on that same path. They're primed, to be the lineman that everybody has been talking about this year. They returned only 2 of 5, but the newcomers are better than that senior group than they had last year. And then all the D-line returned. So they're healthy and they're stronger than they were last year. So I think that's the highlight for them, because we all know, and I think I saw somebody made a post or a write-up about, whoever has the best lineman is going to win D1, and that's just based off of what it's been the last 3 years. So, okay,
something for us to watch for sure as we go toward the 2018 season. All right, let's move on to our second subject here, Scotty. Here we're going to talk about strengths for each team. Why don't you help us break us down? Let's go right back up to Santa Margarita. What's your strength for the Eagles? Coach Fisher's team, he's kind of getting solidified there, established there. They were 7-4 last year, 3-2 in the Trinity League. They took third place. What's your thoughts on their strengths coming back this year with a lot of new faces?
It's going to be O-line. They returned 4 out of 5 starting them. Offensive linemen. They were a solid group last year with that high-powered offense, but all that bells and whistles of that offense are gone. So, they're going to be, that's the good base to start with, and you just build from that. But, their strength is the offensive line. Yeah,
and the guys that we're talking about, Brandon Schilling has got an offer from University of San Diego. Donovan, another offensive lineman, Donovan Orlano, offer from Southern Utah, and then a two-way lineman, Nate Clay, has got some interest from Redlands. So, and then this is all really good news for a running back that I do like, and I think is a sleeper. I guess I think I better save him for this is all good news for their running game. So we'll leave it at that. Let's go next. We're gonna go Jay Sarah. So what do you think their strength is for the Lions? They were off to a great start last year. We all know that they started 8-0, and then they lost to Mater Dei and kind of struggled a little bit down the stretch. But what's your thoughts on the Lions?
So their strengths are going to be the receivers and their running backs or running back. The quandary here, though, is Jay Sarah returns probably the best receiving core with Tarek Luckett, Munar McLean, and Tyler Shimamura, check this out. They're going to count for 114 receptions, 2,030 yards, and 20 touchdowns. But for the first time this season, in 6 seasons, there's not going to be a Robinson under center or at quarterback. So that's huge. So newcomer, Caden Bell is going to have the honor to have to get the ball to those guys. And Bell was, the backup to McMahon last year. So he's, and he's going to he'll be aided by, Chris Street, who is probably primed to be to lead the league in rushing this year. So, that's their core is going to be that skill set, but it's if they can get if that quarterback, if Caden Bell can get the ball to those guys. So
yeah, Jay Sarah also 7-4 last year. They lost in week 8 to Mater Dei, and they were 2-3 in league, and they end up getting in 4th place. Let's talk about Servite. What do you think their strength is looking like this year in their first year in the Trinity League? I think you're going to say it's similar to what we mentioned with Santa Margarita.
Yeah, it's their offensive line and tight end, and the offensive line returns 3 out of 5. Led by the Krebs brothers, senior Richard and junior Clarence, and they're probably going to field one of the bigger lines in the league. So as far as height and weight wise, Jake Overman, and we'll talk more about him. He's a big time tight end, and that's probably gonna, that's a good core to build on for Servite.
All right. Of course, the Friars did get one win in league last year. They beat Orange Lutheran. So Servite was 6-5 last year, 1-4 in the league. They got 5th out of 6th. Almost knocked off Mission Viejo in the playoffs. I was at that game. That was a thriller. Almost got a big time upset in the first round. So that's the gutty Friar team that everyone, and mostly in Orange County, you probably associate with Servite. Modern day, what do you think the strength is for the reigning national champs, Trinity League champions? They were undefeated, 15-0 last year. Won the Trinity, won Division I. In Southern Section, beat De La Salle in the state game. National champs in multiple polls. What's your thoughts on their strength this year, Scotty?
We're going to go with, obviously quarterback, their running backs, Brew and Big Mike, and their secondary. Yeah. So, we're talking Bryce Young, Sean Dollars, and Jacoby Harper, and then Brew at wideout and Big Mike Martinez at the tight end, who's going to create mismatch problems for the opposition, something that's going to be different. Defense, it's no secret that it's Ricks, Darion Greenwarn, William Nemo, Jeremiah Cradell, and nickelback Jalen Davies. So, but you just won't see, the offense won't be the same as the JT offense. Instead it's going to be more balanced, utilizing young skill set, the two backs with Jacoby and Dollars. Scores may not come as quick, but they're still going to be solid with an MD offense.
Okay. Yeah, I think that secondary is going to be outstanding when you have those two corners, the way they're progressing. Elias Risk might be the best junior corner in the country, and then, Darion, the other corner, he's committed to Oklahoma. Pick your poison there. It's going to be tough. And they seem like they have a lot of diverse weapons. I think they're more diverse this year than last year. So let's go Olu. We mentioned them last year, 0-5 in the Trinity League. So they had a tough go in it. Winless, sixth place out of 6 teams. But then they got it going in the playoffs. They won their first round game, got to the quarterfinals in Division I and lost to Mission Viejo. But they ended up playing pretty well at the end. After they ruled their non-league schedule, but they just couldn't get a win in league, and they beat Chaminade in the playoffs 28-25, a pretty good upset. But what's your thoughts on their strength this year, Scotty?
It's quarterbacks and receivers. Yeah, that was pretty much just the same as it was last year. Helinski, Ford, Loya, tight end receiver, Elijah Maharo. That core put up the majority of their offensive numbers last year, so you look for that. That's going to carry them again. The only receiver not returning to them is Cam Gardner. He had 44 catches last year, and he transferred actually back to Mater Dei. So, it's the same story with Olu, but, it's just a new year. Everybody's a little bit older. Everybody's a little bit stronger. So, they're just going to carry that on and fill in the gaps with everything else.
Yeah, they said, I talked to Helinski at the Mission Viejo tournament, and they said they're going to try to commit to the run more this year, and I think that would be wise to keep some pressure off Helinski, keep teams a little bit more unbalanced. But I'm sure it's probably tempting when you have 2 Pac-12 committed, tight ends, and you have Kyle Ford and Logan Loya and JoJo Hawkins. You got a lot of weapons, but I think getting running back Reggie Strong more involved and, keeping teams, those defenses more off balance would help them out. Lastly, let's talk about the Braves season strengths. How do you see the top quality for the Braves this year?
They're going to go with their quarterbacks, their running backs, their O-line, and their D-line. So it's, Bosco's offense is, led by DJ Una Leahy. I know we butcher his name. Yeah. We need to practice to say it more often. But he's going to be aided by that 3-headed monster running back core of Joey Chalani, Nathaniel Jones, and Keith Savage. They combined for 1,600 yards last year in a primarily throwing offense with receiver, Colby Bowman and Chris Hudson. But the newcomers on offensive line, we said, are talented and strong. Maris Televalu is now healthy. He went out last year in game 1 or 2 with the season-ending injury, and so
Yeah.
he's now back. Defensive line with Cole Aubrey all returns. Name Rodman, who recently committed to Colorado, and then Chuava Puati, he missed a lot of last season, and he comes back too. So they're pretty much, it's a Bosco's, going to get it done with that core group.
All right, Scotty. Well, let's flip it now, as we talked about all the positives, all the good stuff that these teams have, and we're talking about one of the best, if not the strongest leagues in the country here. So there's going to be a lot of strengths, and we all heard right now the reasons why they're going to be good teams. But what are some of the weaknesses and areas of concerns for these teams? Let's talk a little bit about that and what these teams are going to be striving to correct, trying to strategize and limit how much this gets exploited, or where they're just trying to get better. But let's start with Santa Margarita. What do you think their area of concern is? What they need to work on?
They don't have any proven skill players going into the season, and they didn't really rely on the transfer route. We said that to fill those spots. Instead they were going to go with a lot of kids within their programs, but they haven't really, they're so much under the radar. We haven't seen anything. Even their younger kids. We see a lot of these schools with all these younger kids going to camps and getting early offers. Santa Margarita has nothing of that sort. And we didn't see them in passing league tournaments, so I don't know, how that's going to translate. They have their offensive line, but I think you can't win in the Trinity League without skilled players. Even though I know you got to have the offensive line, but in the end you have to have speed and athletes, and so I'm not too sure about whether or not that group is elite enough to get it done. So.
Yeah. Well, I'll throw a couple more names out on the Eagles, the guys to watch. And like you said, and you're right on it with it, they're young. One junior wide receiver they like that they compare, Coach Fisher does compare to Grant Calcaterra, who was a standout now at Oklahoma. But they like a receiver, Chase Neednad. They like him, and they also like a tight end who's a sophomore, Gary Morrison Wan, who was a outstanding sprinter in the Trinity League in the spring in the 100 meters. So there's a couple other guys, that combined with those guys that we talked about, maybe those we'll see how good the Cole Yosada from Tesoro transfer is, or Josh Mikas from San Juan Hills, and of course we mentioned, I don't know how much Mark Ard is going to play offense if at all, but those are a couple other names to follow on Santa Margarita. But I definitely hear where you're coming from on that one. Let us talk about who's next in our Trinity League here breakdown. Is we going to go? I forget the order we've been going on.
Jay Sarah.
Jay Sarah. What do you got on the Lions as far as areas of concern?
So their area of the concern is defense, specifically secondary.
Yes.
Only Tyler Shimamura returns, and he was primarily, he's an offensive guy. So
right.
Whether or not, I know Jay Sarah has a lot of young guys playing corner. Victor Clanton, he's a returner. He mans that middle, but the rest of the defense is going to be newcomers or a lot of kids that didn't play a lot last year, and it was concerning to some. It was surprising. You had touched bases on it about Corona Del Mar pretty much handling Jay Sarah in their game at that passing tournament, because I think everyone thought that Jay Sarah's athletes would be able to rise up over Corona Del Mar, but that wasn't the case. And but I think once you get the lines tightened up, they'll make more of a game. But from a defensive secondary, they're going to need help or experience, and so that's their area of concern.
Yeah, I felt like they were, when they struggled, that was their biggest. They gave, the games I saw them play, in summer, their secondary got exposed sometimes on the deep passes. John Humphreys is outstanding at Corona Del Mar, and so is Mark Redmond. And I know those guys have a lot of offers, but they got torched, and they got beat on some other big plays, at the Edison tournament. So that's where I think you're right on. Servite, I think could be somewhat similar to what you said about Santa Margarita and what they need to work on as far as athleticism and speed, right?
Yeah, you're right on it. They're skill players and athletes. Before the new additions, Servite, like I said, was looking like a winless team. And now that they have these new kids that have come in, and I touched bases on them earlier. Alessi, Damian Moon, who actually was a transfer in the offseason. I think he came into Servite from up north in Oakland area. He's like an athlete, so I don't know where he's actually going to play. The Losa group, and I'm going to throw out these names because I think these are kids that actually were looking to be counted on over at Losal. So now they're over at Servite. So there's Daniel Anderson, Zedekiah, and Tobias Centers. They're two brothers, and Noah Avinger and Harrison Kofel. Like I said, I wouldn't surprise if some of the freshmen got a shot, but that's going to be tough because you're playing the physicality in the Trinity League. But yeah, their Achilles heel is going to be able to be matchup skill wise, and they might get baptism by fire just trying to get those sophomores and juniors experience. But McKibben gives them a shot to move the ball down the field, and who knows if the other freshman quarterback gets a shot. But it's definitely going to be skill players and athletes.
All right. Modern day, no team is absolutely perfect, and I think they have some areas that they have to work on because they did suffer a very big injury in the off season, and that was the injury to Mace Funa, who suffered a knee injury. They're all-county linebacker. We know that they lost another great all-county linebacker last year. Solomon graduated and headed up to USC, and he's kind of on the he had an injury late in the year, but Modern Day was able to overcome that. But what's your thoughts? I think maybe you're looking at linebacker as an area where they got some good players, but they still have some things to prove at linebacker.
Yeah, pretty much the big concern was probably gelling together. I think Mace's injury kind of threw a wrench into the mix, but the gelling seems to have come together now. And so I'd probably say offensive line depth and the middle linebackers. The O-line talent is there, but the O-line talent isn't deep.
Right.
So they go five. I don't even know if there's like a sixth guy. And, offensive lines, this won't be a better run blocking group, but how they do in the passer protection, we don't know. Nobody knows, because it's a primarily pretty much group with the new quarterback. But I do know that this group last year, showing what they could do, they were a really good, solid run blocking group. And then all eyes are going to be on Utah commit, 6'7" Luke Felix Fualo making that jump from Cathedral, playing from that lower division. But, that's going to be interesting to watch too. But what people don't realize is that this is Luke's second or third year of organized football. He's an Australian native and he's played rugby most of his life. And he's just athletic. He's got a huge frame. His arms are long, giant wingspan. So when he kicks out, he gets that his arms kicked out, he gets that's his strength, but he's just got to, it's going to be a work in progress with him. As far as middle linebackers, no one returns, and the players manning the middle are probably going to be smaller and unproven in terms of being, the normal middle linebackers. With the lockdown secondary, I would expect teams are going to be trying to run the ball at them rather than trying to throw. So that's obviously their concerns.
Yeah, so they'll have to watch Luke. Luke's going to play right tackle. They're going to switch Miles Morale, outstanding junior, all county, one of the top junior linemen in the country. He's going to go to left tackle, and I think they have some interesting guys at linebacker. Guys like Steele Dunbar is a good linebacker, and I'm very high on Koba Fuamata, transfer from La Habra, who I thought was really on the rise. Koba is going to be a junior, and he kind of had to do a lot at La Habra, and he made a lot of plays there. It'll be interesting to see how he plays on a stacked defense where maybe his role is a little bit more defined. So we'll be interesting to see how he adjusts. But there. But let's also look at the weaknesses. Olu, where do you think? What are the Lancers trying to work on? I think for them, I think a lot of it starts how well they're going to play in the trenches.
Yeah, it's actually going to be their defense is more of a concern, or specifically their defensive line, because they return nobody to their defensive line, and the inexperience is going to be a concern, as well as depth. Unless they got some off-season transfers that I don't know about, they're going to be playing with a lot of younger kids that that are pretty good size from what I see, but they're just inexperienced. And another area is to watch is their running game, because it was non-existent last year. They don't have anybody up and coming, and the only returning guy is Reggie Strong, and he's a great athlete, but at times he was also a defensive starter, and he never really put up the numbers that they need, or they never committed to the running game as much as they said, that they wanted to. But that also had to do with the offensive line wasn't as strong. Olu has to show more balance than being one-dimensional, but their O-line, which is we don't have in this as a concern, would be the next third concern, but they're going to be a lot better. They're going to be improved. They're a lot bigger. They're a lot stronger.
Yeah.
So, hopefully that carries over and allows the offense to have more balance this time around.
Yeah, I think Casavella is one of their good linemen that they're excited about. And he's been impressive on the offseason. But they're going to have some size up front. Coach Presley's talked about guys like J.D. Rice, a center guard who's 6'3", 290. Lava Taviaka, 6'3", 315. Aiden Tenya, 6'5", 300. And then there's a fellow Pepe, 6'4", 325. So they're going to have some size. I just wonder how much of these guys are going to be going both ways. Helping the lines. I think another thing to watch too is with the healthy return of Ethan Ray, who was out all last year with the knee injury. He's that USC committed tight end. Look for him perhaps to play some defense and help out that defensive line. That would be a big pick me up for the Lancers. So they have some guys that we're going to have to get to know on the lines. But I threw out a couple more names for us to follow. Let's wrap it up with as far as areas of weakness or things that the teams are going to be working on, trying to shore up as they get ready for the 2018 season, march toward the Trinity League. What about the Braves, Scotty?
Yeah, it's going to be their secondary and its safeties. Probably everybody minus Chris Steele. It's not the strongest group Bosco has had in the past few seasons. They don't have that dominating presence. It's still solid, but they've shown their vulnerability, giving up more scores than the previous years, in their coverage, in the coverages in these tournaments. But their pass rush will certainly help them once, the pads come on. But, it's going to be their secondary safeties.
Okay. Well, Chris Steele sure is a good one to have back there. USC commit. He's looked outstanding in the passing league. But we'll see how much that push can happen, can help help the secondary. All right, Scotty. Well, now as we wrap up our first installment of our Trinity League Football Podcast, getting ready for the 2018 season, let's talk about some of those under the radar players. I want to get your thoughts on an under the radar player to watch for each team. We'll start back up at with Santa Margarita, and I think we kind of talked about one of them already.
Yeah, I had Mark R. Jr. He's 6 foot, 175-pound junior defensive back. And like I said, he was he's 4'4" speed guy. Played in the secondary with Orange Lutheran last year, so it's just he hasn't been out there. But we'll see what he makes his mark over at Santa Margarita.
Like you said, we got that offer at. From Nevada. There's one guy that I also like. There's their running back. I was kind of alluding to him earlier. I think he could have a really good year. And let me get his name real quick. Yes, here it is. Justin Thomas. I thought he was an emerging guy that he kind of, he wasn't the main guy, but I remember he came in some supplemental times last year, especially against Jay Serra. in their big clash in the Trinity League. That was a very decisive game. He's a guy that popped up and had some, when he got in some mop-up time, or some of their games got out of control a little bit early, last year in non-league. I think he could be a guy. Do you have much recalling on him, Scotty? Justin Thomas?
Yeah, he had about, I think it's Jake Thomas, I believe.
Okay.
But, I know it's Thomas. It's Thomas. But he's about 444 yards last year as a backup to Mayar. He's about a 5'9", 185 pound back. He was solid. So if he'll probably be the primary guy this year. But his experience is what will be crucial.
Yeah. All right. How about an underrated player for Jay Serra?
So Jay Serra, I'm going to have to go with Anthony Ward. He's a junior running back safety. He was the JV running back last year, and he played some safety on varsity. And he's certainly talented. He's about 6 foot, close to 200 pounds. I think he's slated to play on the defensive side, but his athleticism should get him some looks on offense, because I know they have another running back to watch for, Sammy Green.
Right.
So I know between them two, they'll probably split the backup, running back spot with Street. But, Anthony Ward is probably the best underrated player for them.
Yeah, and I know we talk a lot about him on the Trinity League podcast, but I think a guy doesn't really get his due, is senior Tyler Shiramura. I mean, I think he's going to be really important for them. And, he's just an underrated, great high school receiver, tough kid. So,
I had, the only reason why I didn't, I was going more, my under the radar guys whose names have never been heard before. Yeah. So Tyler is in a sense, as people forget about him, but he just is one of those workman-like kids that just get it done. It's not real flashy, but though he has made some highlight reel catches in the summer that I've seen that have been pretty impressive. So,
All right, how about Servite, under the radar player for the Friars?
So Servite, we're going with Jake Overman.
Yeah.
He's the big 6'5", 240 pound tight end who's, people call him Gronk-like, because he's going to be their focal point probably on that Friar offense, at least in the beginning. He's agile, he's big, and he can stretch the field for teams. And so he'll probably cause matchup problems if they can get him the ball, and he'll eventually be a D1 prospect by season's end. But then, I think a couple weeks ago, he picked up his first offer from, I believe, UNLV.
Right.
So look for Jake Overman. That's
a good one there. We mentioned the Krebs. A couple other junior linemen they like. Nick Martinez, 6'5", 300, and Gemini Luete Lulu, 6'4", 295. A couple good juniors, but my dark horse there is going to be Geminia's brother, Isaiah Luta Lulu, 5'11", 240, bowling ball type running back. I don't know if you remember him. Came up a little bit late in the season, but I think he's also going to play some linebacker. But I think they're going to try to play a bruising style, and that guy at 5'11", 240 is going to be tough to tackle.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I know he was when he was at Mater Dei, he was a strictly defensive guy. He was just a nose guard, undersized nose guard. I don't even think he played linebacker, but again, that was what, at Mater Dei. So seeing what, they're going to use him that at Servite is very interesting, I'll say, none the least. So,
yeah. All right. And let's finish up here. They're underrated players. Do you have an underrated player at Mater Dei for us, Scotty?
Yes, and it's actually someone who no one's ever heard of or ever talked about. No, it's hard to get that when you're at Mater Dei, but I'm going to go with this kid's certainly under the radar. He's a junior, 6 foot, 260 pound nose guard, Martin Salazar. And his season was cut short last year after injury in the shoulder. I think it was like week 4, but he was close to being the starter over Samuela Makahala last year, and he looked really good. And then he got hurt, and that was it. And then Samuel took over, and we know the story. He just got better and better as the season progressed, dominating, at the nose guard spot for them. But Salazar's looked good this offseason. They said he's one of the toughest kids to block on that D line. He's just not a D1 kid right now or getting any types of offers. I don't think he did any camps or anything like that. So, you look at him and he doesn't really pass your eye test, but he's just a hard-nosed kid. So
wow. Well, that's a good one. I can't really beat it. I think the guy I was going to mention, who, if readers of OCVarsity, or of course follow all the other, or follow the really good recruiting sites, probably know about Damani Jackson, the freshman at Mater Dei. I think we mentioned him already on the show. But he's going to be a freshman offered by USC among others, and is a really impressive safety.
Yeah, more to add more on those guys. Yeah, they're probably going to be, we're not too sure what their situation is, if they'll play all varsity or play freshman or just be on. But yes, they have shown their own. But I think we've seen enough to where they those kids are getting offers. It's kind of hard to be seeing them as being under the radar player. You could say the same for Jalen Davies, because he's going to be their nickel back.
Right.
But he's going to get he's overshadowed by the three other greats. I mean, he would be a starter anywhere else. But yeah, I couldn't argue with your under the radar guy either. So.
All right, and two more to go. Scotty, how about Orange Lutheran and Bosco?
So with Olu, I'm going to go with it's probably a senior lineman, 6'3", 250, Jake Casavella. I mean, he will be one of the reasons Olu will be better up front this year. He played last season, but, he didn't have the huge presence, but he's had a great offseason. He's gone up against some of the nation's top defensive linemen at these Men in the Trenches camps, and he's had some great reviews, and he's added, I think, he's a lot bigger, too, I think, than he was last year. And then you want me to go with Bosco, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, with Bosco, like Mater Dei, it's hard to be under the radar. But, I'm going junior offensive lineman, 6'3", 270, Drake Metcalf. Linemen don't get as much love in the offseason as the skill players do, but he's also another one that's had good offseason. He has picked up 3 offers, Oregon, Arizona State, and Hawaii, and he was an MVP at one of the USC camps. So he's going to be one of the anchors over at Bosco for them.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a good one there for sure. Metcalf. Yeah, he's been getting on my radar as well. And you make good points about that whole Bosco offensive line. I'm going to throw one name at you from back with the Lancers into our Trinity League broadcast here is Zach Brogdon. I think is going to be is probably a known senior linebacker, but they have a couple of them there. But I think he could be one of the better ones we see this year in Orange County. So I like him, and I think I agree with you on the lineman from St. John Bosco.
Yeah, there's a lot of kids we could put under the radar. I know we talk a lot about the same kids, but I think some of these kids get their due with this. We are working hard in the off season, so and we'll when we have more time, we could go on and on, but we'll highlight some more kids for you guys.
Yeah, Metcalf. He told me that he's going to start at left tackle, and he was right tackle last year, and he has 3 offers. Like you said, Oregon, Arizona State, and Hawaii. So that's a pretty good one. I mean, if you're the starting left tackle at Bosco, you're doing pretty well. So, but hey, as we close out this Trinity League Football Podcast, our first one here of the season, I want to thank you everyone for listening to us and your support, and we really appreciate it. We're here working for you. Couple scrimmages this week could happen, I think. On Thursday, expecting Santa Margarita to be placed host to Long Beach Millikan, 7 o'clock. Check out these times with the scrimmages if they indeed happen or not. Sometimes they do get canceled last minute. Just scrimmages here. And then Friday, thinking Jay Sarah might be at home at 7 o'clock against Norco. Not positive about that. And then also, I do know Mater Dei is going to be home on Friday, 6 o'clock, I believe it is, against Fountain Valley. Is that right, Scotty?
Yes, it is.
And let's see, and it just came in here to our Trinity League Football Podcast. According to Coach Harlow, it will be Norco on Friday at 7 o'clock. That should be a pretty good scrimmage. Probably the ones we mentioned right there. Norco at Jay Sarah's pretty good.
Yeah, that'll be a good one. I went to that one last year, and it was pretty good last year. So,
all right, and as we return next week on our podcast, we will take an overview of these teams. We talked about the strengths and weaknesses. We'll present our season overview for each of these teams and our predictions, and we will start to break down the opening games of the season. So, Scotty, we got a lot of names. You gave me some names that I got to check out and start finding some of these players out. So you gave me some more work to do. So thanks a lot.
As always, Dan, got to keep you going.
Hopefully, I gave you a couple names to check out as well, and I hope we gave all our listeners some names and a little bit closer feel of the Trinity League. So, Scotty, thanks a lot, man. It's great talking as always.
As always, Dan, keep going. We'll keep going and going.
All right. So for Scott Barajas, I am Dan Albano, and again, thanks again for joining us on the Trinity League Football Podcast.